Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Established Run's NBA Injury Report Analysis Show. I'm Drew Dinkmeyer here with Mike Gallagher to walk through Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Finals alongside Game 3 of the Western Conference Finals. We have reverted to our every other day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday scheduling. So we'll tackle both games in these segments from an injury perspective and also touch on any rotation notes we might need to add. With me to do it, as always, is Mike Gallagher. Mike, how are you?
Doing great. Yeah, really good game yesterday. Just an incredible finish. Blue Arrow, my guy coming up big, and it was the hunter became the hunted. They were hunting Jamal Murray with LeBron, and then now it's the other way. They were really going after LeBron. If you ever seen the movie Goldeneye, there's a little it's a spike thing. He says all the time. It's like, oh yeah, but yeah, it was a great game, and shout out to Jamal Murray for sure.
Yeah, Nuggets take a 2-0 lead in the series, protect home court. We'll see if Boston can win one of the games at home court and level the series tonight. Let's start with that Boston Miami game from an injury perspective. As has been the case most of the season, the Miami Heat's injury report a little bit longer than their opponents. Tonight, they have listed, of course, out Tyler Hero and Victor Oladipo. Questionable tag on Omer Yurtseven, who is not a part of the rotation. And then available tags for Cody Zeller and Bam Adebayo. Same available tag Bam Adebayo had in the first game where he played extremely effectively for 37 minutes. Upgrade for Cody Zeller from the questionable tag he had in game one to available in game two. Any notes from an injury perspective on Miami side of things?
No, the only thing we talked a little bit about Jimmy. There's some reporting saying he would need a couple weeks to get 100%, and no, he did not. I think the biggest tell on that he is healthy is who he guarded. He guarded a lot of Jason Tatum. We saw when he was coming off the injury early in the Knicks series, he was guarding Jalen Brunson. Gets hurt, they take him off Brunson. That's pretty clear indication that he's ready to go. So yeah, definitely 43 minutes is the other indication that he is ready to go here. So yeah, they should be pretty healthy. Didn't really see anything there. Yeah, rotation notes. Duncan went away in the second half. Kind of expected. I don't think it's gonna be a Duncan series. They might go straight nine, just because Lowry, Martin, even Gabe Vincent are all so important here. Maybe it'll affect. Maybe he can cut into love a little bit. But yeah, I think that's probably the only rotation note is just keep an eye on Duncan. I think the rest of the guys and Struce's minutes are a little dicey because they need Caleb. Gabe was great. Lowry's great. They obviously need Jimmy and Bam. So there's a chance that Struce gets cut down. But yeah, that third quarter certainly gave him a little bit of leash.
Yeah, Struce and Duncan combined for 41 in this game. At
Speaking of
times,
leash,
yeah, we have seen them combine for a full 48. So definitely a willingness to play a little bit more overlap with the small guards and a little bit more emphasis on the wing defense as well. You mentioned straight nine. I think you meant straight eight that Duncan could get down,
sorry, yeah,
get cut down
yeah,
to an 8-man rotation. It was essentially an 8-man rotation with Duncan and Zeller filling like an eighth role combined between
mhm.
the two for 16 minutes. So we saw things really, really tight last game, 34 minutes or more for four of the starters, and then two bench players, 28 minutes or more. Is that the expectation if these games are competitive that you think those six guys essentially are going to be the ones that have to carry the load?
Yeah, I think so. It's pretty clear that Lowry's defense is really good. Got in the way a bunch. He's a really tough guy to drive through, and that was really Boston's strength. So I think Lowry kind of helps that weakness there, and then you're adding more ball handling. So just clear roles needed by those guys. Where Love, had a couple big trailer threes that were almost backbreaking. But yeah, I think he's just not as important. And we could talk about the big decision is on Boston's side here, but we should see generally the same Miami rotation.
Yeah. All right. So let's move to the Boston side of things from an injury perspective. Malcolm Brogdon listed on the injury report, probable with a right forearm
Hmm.
strain. No concerns about availability, but we'll note that it's a new injury from a listing perspective. Jalen Brown still listed available with the facial fracture and the face mask, as has been the case much of the playoffs. And then, of course, Daniel Gallinari, he's been lost for the season. So the Brogdon probable note. Any notes around here for Malcolm Brogdon with that right forearm strain?
No, I didn't get anything from the shoot around pressers or anything like that. But only note is he has missed a game with a probable tag. I think multiple games with a probable tag. Shooting arm, forearm strain, yeah, not great. So definitely mild concern there. Just because as I mentioned, the probable tag could be a little worse than expected, just because how Boston usually lists guys. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Expect him to play, of course, but yeah, maybe we'll see if anything's going on, shooter, warm ups and stuff like that.
And then rotation notes, a couple interesting nuggets from game one here. We expected Boston, who had gone to a 7-man rotation basically in the last 2 games of the Philadelphia series, to expand back out to 8, potentially even 9. We were thinking was a potential. We thought Grant Williams or Sam Hauser would fill that role. It ended up being Peyton Pritchard. 12 minutes was not very effective on the floor there. What are your expectations in terms of what we see with that 8th man tonight? Do they go back to the 7? Now
Yeah.
this game is somewhat similar to a game 6 and game 7, where those were elimination games, obviously, so it's not quite the same. But going 0-2 at home would be,
Hmm.
pretty close to a nail in the coffin. So, do you think we have the potential to see a 7-man rotation back for Boston tonight, or do you think they continue to stick with 8? And if they do go 8, who is the 8th tonight?
I think seven's almost likely. If you had to pick between seven or one of the other three guys, like each is individual, I think that there's a greater chance that it's seven than it's any other guy I would feel great about.
Okay.
Pritchard was not good. There was some comments from about Grant Williams that were very odd. He almost like kind of like stay ready-ish kind of a thing. Talking about versatility. It was a very weird question about Grant, who they could use for band post defense or Jimmy defense as well. Spacing, he's a good 3-point shooter. All things that he likes, but for some reason he just doesn't like him. So I came into my hike. I listened to stuff when I was hiking and came out of the hike like, oh man, maybe Grant's not safe after all. So could be Grant, could be Hauser, could be Pritchard. Don't think it has anybody else, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him go just 7 here.
And in terms of the rotation, we saw them lean back into that big rotation. I noted in our podcast that, the Robert Williams minutes I didn't think went particularly effectively despite his offensive impact. Defensively, he
Hmm.
didn't have the same level of impact. Miami didn't seem threatened in the paint around him. He was a minus 14 in those 26 minutes. It's difficult to diagnose Boston until you see a starting lineup, and then you have a little bit of a better idea of kind of how they're going to approach things. But I came away from game one thinking, really the only way that Miami is going to continue to give Boston problems is at the 3-point line. And the best way to defend the 3-point line is not necessarily with Robert Williams out on the floor, or I should say more specifically, not with Robert Williams and Al Horford both out on the floor
Yeah.
together. And so I think both of those guys' minutes ceilings are a little bit at risk tonight. It's certainly possible that one of them takes a bigger chunk of the pie early in the playoffs. That was Al Horford. If it was Time Lord, that wouldn't shock me if it was Time Lord over Al Horford and Al Horford's minutes came down. But I just think in general, we'll see them get to a little bit more of those smaller lineups. What are your thoughts on Boston tonight from a rotation perspective?
Yeah, so we've been kind of talking about the slot in our Slack. A couple of things going on here. So the easy part I can answer is the offensive side. Missoula doesn't like the Time Lord offense. I feel like he wants shooting. I think he's probably upset that they got out three on volume. That probably drives him mad. So I think if Time Lord gets pulled from the starting lineup, I feel very confident that's the reason why. Two, and I posted all the threes on Twitter. Looked at some other ones. I feel like the Time Lord. This dog, my brother's dog, is killing me here, man. Um, that I feel like the Time Lord. He's biting my hand, dude. The Time Lord defense wasn't really a problem. Like it was just losing guys in off ball stuff, losing guys on ball stuff, not going over screens, not switching, not just. It was just like lack of execution defensively. I think the game plan was fine. I gotta let him out in a second here. And then yeah, so I feel like he's probably getting pulled outside, but I'll be handed to you while I get this dog outside. Sorry.
Okay. Live from the Gallagher kennel, Mike Gallagher reporting. But yeah, I think in general, even though it's not necessarily Time Lord specifically from a defensive standpoint that was leading to the mishaps, I think it's a lineup that naturally, when you have Time Lord on the floor, you're deterring shots from the rim. You're deterring guys
Mhm.
from driving just naturally. People are less likely to try to attack the rim when Robert Williams is there. So you're sort of just funneling Miami into the only way that they can beat you when you're playing a lot of Time Lord out there, because they're just like, look, we'd rather take tough threes than try to get shots at the rim because we're not going to be able to get shots at the rim. So from my perspective, it just seems like it's counterproductive to what you're naturally trying to accomplish with Miami, which is make them try to beat you from two and try to beat you from the foul line. That's the way that Boston can leverage some of their talent advantage over Miami is by not losing the math game. And they lost the math game in a big way in game one by allowing so many threes and allowing a 50+% shooting performance from Miami, which is partially due to Miami just shooting extremely well. But really, they got a lot of open looks. Now, they shot better than you normally would on open looks, but it's not like they were making a ton of contested wild threes. They were just making open threes at an unusually high clip. And that to me is concerning because that's the only way that I think Miami overcomes this talent gap between the two teams is if they are able to get a lot of open threes.
Couple things to add. I think that the biggest. I don't think Time Lord was a big problem. Like your point about funneling makes 100% of sense. The biggest problem by a mile was honestly a lot of know your personnel stuff. Like Malcolm Brogdon 3 times would rotate to Bam or Zeller on the 3-point line. Like, what are you doing? And then the extra pass kicks to Strus wide open. It was just execution, man. Doubling when you didn't have to. It was poor execution. But I think that point stands that just funneling them that way makes sense. But the other point too is this line has been great. Best lineup in the NBA last year. Lineup more or less got them to the finals last year. So but Missoula hates it though. Missoula just wants shooting. So don't have a great read on the situation on who starts, but I think they want it to be well. And then the other note too is Time Lord had a presser after practice. He looked distraught. They showed him the tape, and we kind of buried the lead a little bit. The biggest Time Lord issue was like Jimmy shooting over the top of him and Lowry shooting over the top of him. He just wasn't closing out and defending. There was a comment from him saying that, like, oh yeah, I didn't want to fall for pump fakes, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, so again, this is always the Boston analysis for adjustments. Play better. I think that's kind of where they're at. I don't think they should go that adjustment early. I think you probably want to save it because I think that if they execute better, they'd probably win the game kind of easily, honestly.
Yeah, that's most likely the case. I would also say that I think Time Lord, I don't think he should be contesting Jimmy shots. He's going to get Jimmy at the foul line, which, like, I think Time Lord's caught in between, essentially, which is you don't want to contest as much because Jimmy's gonna foul you, but then you have to give him a little bit of more space. And this is another reason why I just don't think it's a great series for Time Lord. So we'll see how Boston ends up shaking things up. I do think they'll generally go a little bit smaller. Brogdon has had really huge minutes the last few games. That coupled with the probable tag, coupled with I just think they got to get a little bit more Derek White out there for some of the stuff that White does defensively is really important. I know a lot of it is on-ball defense, but he's also a pretty good positional defender and doesn't make a lot of those same mistakes that Malcolm Brogdon was making in game one. So I'm interested to see if Derek White's minutes tick up substantially from a couple different potential sources. There's the source of just like they go 7, right? Then everybody ticks up. But if you look at where guys could potentially tick up from, he's got the most room to move up. Then there's the, maybe Malcolm Brogdon is more hurt, or maybe they're upset with the defensive lapses, and then he gains more minutes that way. There's also hey, they just play smaller, and Derek White gains more minutes that way. And so a guy who's averaging 30+ minutes in the first playoff series and then got cut down substantially after game 4 basically of the Philadelphia series, I think he could rebound in a big way tonight.
And yeah, the first series was very much a guard matchup with Trae Young. Second series, not. They just like, okay, how do we junk up the pick and roll? And that's what solved it. The Miami Heat, they don't run a lot of pick and roll. They've actually been great at it. They've been one of the best pick and roll teams in the NBA, partly because shooting over the top of it's been a big weapon for them. But yeah, definitely makes sense that there's so many paths for Derek White to boost, and someone getting in foul trouble, whether it's Jalen or Smart or somebody else. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yep. All right, let's move to tomorrow's game 3 between Denver and the Lakers. Those two teams have not filed an injury report at this point, but I don't think there's anything that we have to take away. After the game, there were some questions on LeBron James' ankle from kind of landing late in the game. He said he's fine to go and good to play, and Darvin Ham said it would be really hard to keep him out. I personally, I don't think that was I think the beats who cover the Lakers are just used to asking about LeBron and AD from a health perspective quite a bit. So I think that's like a normal line of questioning. And I think after a game, they are open to that line of questioning after a loss to basically be like, oh yeah, like LeBron was dinged up. So I'm not worried about it. Are you?
No, I'm more not worried about him playing, but he had a really bad fourth, man. Defensively, we talked about him being hunted in the open. So we'll see. It's worth noting this is not the same foot that kept him out for a while that he hurt in February and missed most of the second half of the season. But should be good. But yeah, we could talk about, I guess maybe we should talk a little bit about it since we're not doing content for it tomorrow. But yeah, I thought that the biggest adjustment from, AD having a bad game, I posted a little video on Twitter. They played a deep drop and it took AD out of his comfort zone. He had 20 points in game one that were off just cuts or rolls. That got to, I think like 5 or 7 or something. And it was just like he couldn't get anything around the basket because they were playing such a deep drop. So huge credit to Jokic. Obviously, the starting lineup change was big. Going to Vanderbilt, don't think that was a problem. We are left with the big question again: Is D'Lo? How much is D'Lo going to play? Plays basically the whole first quarter. Got some late minutes before he got pulled out a little bit. Was not very good. The ball handling role went away. He had 2 lucky dimes, had 2 Austin Reeves 3 dimes, and the rest of the passes were to LeBron 3-pointers that were not good. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. Lonnie's minutes weren't very good. Rui was obviously awesome. He's going to be a big, big piece of the rotation. We saw a little bit of AD. We saw a lot of LeBron guarding Jokic, which was interesting. Yep. And I don't know if that's a good idea because they have to create all the offense right now. And just being tasked to guard Jokic, it's like and Jokic also, too, it's a guard AD. The star players have such big roles on both ends. It's quite something to see.
Yeah. And LeBron was effective in limiting Jokic in those situations. I think Jokic was 0 for 5 with LeBron as the primary defender, had a few turnovers as well. But they were able to get a lot of their dribble handoff stuff really effectively. LeBron was struggling to contest, whether it was Michael Porter Jr. or Jamal Murray on those dribble handoffs. And whether that's the defensive responsibility of not wanting to leave Jokic, whether it's he's gassed, he's playing 40 plus minutes, he's trying to defend a guy that's much bigger than him, and it's late in the fourth quarter and he's gassed. I think that's somewhat true as well. As I said, for Jokic in game one, how the adjustments, this is 2 consecutive games for Jokic that the Lakers have changed primary defenders in the fourth quarter and Jokic has struggled. I don't know that it's the change on the primary defender as much as Jokic has been busting his butt, trying to push in transition for 40 minutes, and then he's wearing down at the end of the game. Thankful for Jamal Murray to be able to kind of, push things across the finish line when needed there. But I do think, on the Lakers side of the ball, there are still some adjustments to make, but there's not much left. And this is the thing from the Lakers perspective that you've got to be concerned about. You can say, okay, they're going to shoot better. 8 for 30 from 3. They got to be able to shoot better. LeBron and AD are probably not going to go, 13 for 34 again. And those are the things you would lean on from the Lakers. But they've been getting great performances from Austin Reeves and Rui Hachimura. There's not too much more that they can squeeze out of that. It looks like D'Angelo Russell is going to really, really struggle defensively in this series. And Lonnie Walker has some of the same issues defensively that D'Angelo Russell has. And so now you're looking down the roster and you're like, okay, well, Malik Beasley is still kind of the same thing as these guys. That's kind of like a rearranging deck chairs situation. So Troy Brown Jr., the next option, who's not necessarily a noted defender by any means, but does offer a little bit more size and length. Perhaps he steals some of those Lonnie Walker minutes in this game. It's much more of a natural progression to go from Lonnie Walker playing like mid-20s at the end of the Golden State series to like 20 in game 1 to 13 to like, okay, let's try somebody else, than it would be from game 2 to go to Troy Brown, which we thought was a possibility as well. So I think that's on the table. I think Vanderbilt, basically, I think they know they need to get away with some minutes there. It was a really interesting decision, one that I thought was shaky in terms of Darvin Ham making that decision. But ultimately, like, there's not that many great options here. And the reason he went to him was because they got destroyed on the boards in game 1. Yeah. And so they're trying to find lineups where they don't have to play Anthony Davis at center so that they can be more competitive on the boards. That was effective in terms of when Vanderbilt was on the floor. They rebounded the ball fine. But once they got into the smaller lines with Rui, which they want, they start struggling to rebound the ball again. So this is the challenge of Jokic. And you were mentioning the drop coverage, Jokic on AD. I saw one other national personality, Nate Duncan, tweet about it. everybody wants to harp on Jokic's defense all year long, wants to harp on the highlight reels of him getting isolated and worked by Steph and Jordan Poole in the playoffs and whatnot. He played great last night. The drop coverage was really great, and he used his body, which he is a big dude, to wall off AD's ability to get easy looks at the rim. And there were a number of times where AD tried to go around the rim, and Jokic was able to get a hand up and kind of contest the shot. He is laterally challenged, Jokic, but he's got very quick hands. He's an exceptional defensive rebounder. And if you need to score right around the basket on a post up, he's super strong and going to make that a difficult contest. His at rim protection numbers are so bad because athletically he can't get up to the rim to challenge guys coming in from deeper takeoff points. But from right around the rim, he's pretty good. And that's what the deep drop coverage allowed them to get away with. That's going to force you to hit a bunch of those like mid-range little, 10, 12 footers for AD. He didn't have the shot going last night. And as a result, you see he shot 4 for 15.
Yep.
Do you think the Lakers make drastic changes to this rotation in Game 3?
So let's start with who could be the drastic rotation, right? I mean, the number one's D'Lo. Just no impact on the game, man. Like, he had a big three, and not a big one, but, it was a good three. He pointed at Bruce Brown, we hit it. And then other than that, just was not – everything else he got was just like, throwing the ball ahead to Vanderbilt in the opening play, handing it to LeBron on a breakaway dunk. Just didn't add value to the team. So, he was supposed to have a big game, according to Birmingham. He did not. So, they can't play him 30 minutes. Just can't. They've got to find other solutions, whether that's Troy Brown, whether that's Lonnie Walker. Hey, maybe Shaq Harrison give him some minutes to guard Jamal Murray for, 3 minutes. But I think that's where you go. They probably aren't going to pull him right away. But because I think that the Vanderbilt stuff was fine. They started out okay. You mentioned, I think they're probably going to go into it with the same starting lineup, but they've got to do something different. I think Lonnie's got to go. I think that's kind of the easy one. As great as he was in the last series, he can go away. Reese is going to play 40, I think. LeBron, AD are going to play a ton. Rui's going to play a bunch. Maybe you just start Rui. Just like, okay, we know Rui's been valuable in this series. What's the best way to up his minutes? And also worth noting, something a little later than we thought. We talked a lot about an early sub, and that didn't really happen. So that's one rotation. But getting Rui to like low 30s, something along those lines, then maybe adding some new pieces to the rotation would be where they're at. But this was much like Boston. This was an execution game. They just couldn't perform late. They got cooked by Jamal Murray. They took really, really poor shots. LeBron taking contested threes, not getting any pressure on the rim late. So not necessarily a personnel loss. It was more of a strategy and just kind of folding late loss.
Yeah, I think the challenges that the Lakers have in this series are the fact that they need to sort of play bigger to not lose the possession battle in a substantial way from a rebounding perspective. But if they play bigger, whether it's guys like Jared Vanderbilt, Troy Brown Jr., let's even say Tristan Thompson, whoever it is, those are all limited offensive players that allow Denver's key players to potentially get a rest or their defense to hone in on just a few guys, which we saw how effective they could be in that Phoenix series when Phoenix only had like 2 guys on the floor that could really challenge them. And then if they play the smaller lineups that can stress Denver defensively a little bit more, they lose the possession game, and they potentially are vulnerable to giving up transition because they're getting out rebounded so badly. And from Denver's side, the risk for Denver is that they don't have a lot of great answers if LeBron is really insistent on going to the rim over and over again. There's not much that Denver can do in those scenarios. The problem for the thing that Denver has on their side is LeBron James is 38 years old and he's playing 40 minutes a night every other day. And that is just a whole ton to ask for him to just be a relentless driver in the way that we saw LeBron in his 20s and early 30s do in the playoffs. Because that version of LeBron, I think, wins this series because the Nuggets don't have a good answer for him getting to the rim so consistently. The challenge is I don't think LeBron has that energy in him to play 4 quarters of going at the rim all the time, every offensive possession. And that's an unrealistic ask of most guys in their early 30s, let alone a guy in his late 30s. But I think that's kind of the push and pull of this series and why you see some of these runs in the series. It's like when LeBron can consistently attack the rim, the Lakers offense prevents the Nuggets from getting in transition, is more efficient naturally, and the Lakers go on runs. But then LeBron starts settling for jumpers and they start trying to run the offense through someone else, and all of a sudden the Nuggets are getting rebounds, they're getting out and running, and they're putting streaks together. So I think in a lot of ways, the series, unfortunately for the Lakers, is sort of dependent on the ability of LeBron to really impose his will, driving at the basket over and over and over again. And it's just a lot to ask for a 38-year-old.
Yeah, they had 23 and 24 transition possessions, the Nuggets did. So that was a pretty big trend. I talked a lot about it going away in the second half, but they came out in the first half again and really established themselves in transition. Very, very clear, bullet point in the coaching meetings, I'm sure, to like, hey, make sure you're running. Everyone knows this. We talked about this all season for the Lakers. But and then just going back to the drop point, that works twofold. You're playing the drop, you're kind of giving LeBron the ability to shoot over it a little bit easier. Great. Let him have it.
Yep.
So it's the really, really sharp, and that I'm sure they're going to stick with. So the Lakers got to so this is tough, right? I mean, if you need just more shooting, right? And who's shooting on the team? D'Lo, yikes. Rui, he's not a ball handler. Well, like Reeves, you're just giving. That's probably the adjustment. Like Reeves probably has to handle the ball more.
Yeah.
So curious to see how he fits into this.
Which is asking a lot, but he has answered every
Yeah.
question that's been asked of him in the playoffs. All right, let's move to the Denver side of things. I did think we saw some interesting rotation adjustments in this one, some due to really unique whistle in the first quarter that was, I mean, I'm obviously a little bit biased towards Denver in this spot, but I saw a lot of national people who cover the Lakers talking about the Lakers getting a friendly whistle in the first quarter. There were 2 quick fouls on each of Michael Porter Jr., Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and Christian Brown, which really led to some weird rotation stuff. But I will note, Christian Brown, even despite getting in early in this game, only 5 minutes. And we talked about how in game 1, he was really ineffective. The Lakers just aren't covering him at all. He hasn't made any of the threes he's taken. I think he's 0 for 3 in the series, and he has to be out on the floor. So what was the move? You saw 3 Reggie Jackson minutes. That was just foul trouble emergency stuff.
Grand opening, grand closing.
Yeah, that's not going to happen again. What happened? Well, the Nuggets were like, we got 6 guys we can play, and we're going to try to play them a lot. And then we're going to have Jeff Green try to cover up some holes wherever we can. But Bruce Brown got up to 37 in part because Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was in that early foul trouble, but more so in part because Bruce Brown was exceptional in the second half, knocking down shots, getting out in transition, providing a secondary ball handler. And so we saw Bruce Brown get all the way up to 37 minutes, team high plus 16 in the performance. He seemed to never run out of juice. He seemed to be the guy that was constantly pushing and pushing and pushing. We saw, and this is why I said after game one felt like a game 5 to me. I felt like these two teams were sort of starting to get out of adjustments to make. And it's just, you got to play your best guys as much as possible. And Denver went to that, knowing that going up 2-0 at home was so important. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Christian Brown get another shot. I wouldn't be surprised if Vlatko Konchar gets a shot at filling that role. And up 2-0, they don't necessarily try to play the 6-man rotation again that they did, or 6-7, I should say, that they basically did last game. But it's in the cards now that Denver's basically going to 7 with the guys that they trust, because Christian Braun had earned himself the 8th spot. But the deeper you get into the playoffs, the harder it is to continue to earn that role. So what are your thoughts on Denver in rotation depth heading into game 3?
Yeah, not great for Christian Brown. Didn't use his size well on defense. Obviously, he's just a complete 0 on offense. As you mentioned, just 3 shots, and that's pretty much one other 2-pointer, but just not a factor. Just sitting in the corner, not involved in the actions. Just like, what's he doing? So I feel like he can get booted again. Kind of the same story where maybe they just go 7. I think they would love to get game 3. Maybe I don't think that they want to. Mike Malone doesn't strike me as a guy who wants to take his foot off the gas. So I think that they probably just go 7. But the way things shook out with how Bruce has been, Bruce has been, God, like what a great game from him, and just trash talking D'Lo getting in his head was really great too. But there's no other. Konchar, sure, I don't feel great about it. At least he gives you some shooting that you could rely on. But I think that they might just go 7. Maybe they probably try Christian Brown just to ease things up in the first half. But they might go 7 in the second half.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most likely outcome, and it's probably Brown that gets another chance before Conchar. But I will note, if the Lakers start trending bigger and bigger and bigger, meaning less Lonnie Walker, less D'Angelo Russell, that might mean Conchar gets a shot over Christian Brown just because of his size. And there's guys that if they're playing like Vanderbilt or they're playing Troy Brown Jr., Conchar can hide on those guys until he gets hunted, and then the Nuggets will have to deal with whatever they deal with the switching and whatnot. But there's a chance that they go to him as a trial in that spot.
You can just get
but I agree with you.
Or something.
Yeah, exactly. And in general, I think we know what Denver needs. They need a lot of Aaron Gordon, a lot of Michael Porter Jr., a lot of Bruce Brown, a lot of KCP, a lot of Murray and Jokic. And then Jeff Green, they just need him to hold on in those minutes that Jokic is off the floor. Even Uncle Jeff will still make his presence felt, though, with a rim run. Man, that dunk was awesome last night. All right. Any other notes before we get out of here?
No, just a lot of minutes from Murray, a lot of minutes from Jokic. Just a crazy game. I can't believe Jamal Murray has 4 20-point force, man. Just total stud. And just like, what a Jamal Murray game, right? Like, bad for 3 quarters. Just like, got the post. He was so bad for 3 quarters. And then he's the post game interview because he just went complete nuke. But such a fun game, such a fun team. And man, it's gonna be tough to pick against them. Like I went in thinking like, oh man, am I gonna be able to pick Denver over Boston? I picked Boston like emphatically in every series, but I might be picking Denver, man. This team just Andrew Wiggins has called them a team of destiny. It's kind of feeling like it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to say. And on the other side of the team of destiny coin, Jimmy Butler has said it's their year. So while you're counting your Boston chickens, Jimmy Butler, we'll see if he's got a package of raw spoiled eggs for you. All right,
get canceled like Boston Market with the chicken. Are they still? I think they went bankrupt and are they back now? I don't know. Anyways,
I do not know. I'm not in tune with the chain fast food restaurants. Living in New York City, don't have a lot of exposure to those. All right. As always, support the people that are supporting us. This show is brought to you by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. They have daily NBA sneak drafts for money running edition, many formats of NFL contests still running for huge cash prizes. If you're playing NBA Pick'em, in-season subscribers can use our tools at ETR to compare ETR projections to their fantasy Pick'em games. And if you haven't signed up for Underdog yet, use promo code ETR for a matching deposit bonus up to $100. That's promo code ETR at underdogfantasy.com. All right. As always, not myself today. It'll be Mike Gallagher and Gary Hartman behind the paywall at 5:00 Eastern. I am going to take the day off. We'll get one last look at Gary pre-fatherhood, hopefully, in today's show at 5:00, and he can have his send off once again to everyone. You guys will be talking the good chalk, the bad chalk, the contrarian pivots, and of course the macro strategy around showdown for this Miami Boston series. So tune in at 5:00 behind the paywall at EstablisherRun.com. As always, if you're uninterested in giving us your hard-earned dollars, we do ask for your hard-earned clicks. Subscribe to this YouTube channel, get notifications whenever we go live, and of course, smash that like button. You smash that like button, it feeds the algorithm. You feed the algorithm, it helps feed our families, and then we feed you the NBA injury information analysis you need to make your spread bets, prop bets, DFS lineups, and so on and so forth. So feed that algorithm. Nom, 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 nom. Have a great weekend. We'll see you again on Monday.